Hello BookTube, it's Joshua here, and today I was thinking that I would like to do a 2024 reading wrap-up, or at least a kind of general survey of most of the books that I read during 2024. I have Goodreads, but I don't really keep track of what I read throughout the year, so there's a chance that I may have missed some books. I got a bunch of books that I read here, but there's a chance that a couple slipped through the cracks. And I'm not really sure how much I have read. I have a bunch of books around my feet here. It's probably something like 30 books or 25 books. So I figured I would just go one by one and just say a couple of words about them, and yeah, maybe you guys would find that interesting. So, but first, I wanted to actually show you guys some new CDs that I got. There were 3 CDs, and actually all 3 of them were gifted to me by 2 different people. The first one was actually given to me by a university friend, and he gave it. This is Trio des Iscles, and it's a kind of anthology of Canadian piano trios, and I haven't listened to the full CD yet, but I listened to the first piece titled "Among Friends," and it was just delightful, and so I'm really excited that I have this. I've never listened to any Canadian classical music before this, so I'm glad that I have this. So thank you, Diogo. And the next 2 CDs were given to me by someone from BookTube, or someone who's been like commenting on my videos, and he very incredibly kindly purchased for me 2 CDs. The first of which is Bartok's 6 string quartets, and this is played by the Juilliard Quartet, and it's the 1981 recording. And so I have this here. It's still in the wrap because I just got it today. And then the other one was also the Handel Project by Seung Jin Cho, or I don't know if I'm saying the name right, but it has 3 of Handel's suites as well as Brahms's Handel variations. And I have listened to the 3 suites so far, and I've been listening to them. I've been repeatedly listening to them, and it's been really, really delightful. So thank you for that. Yeah, I figure I'll show you the books that I read. The first book that I read in 2024 was Spring Snow by Yukio Mishima. This was actually I picked this up because my university friend, the same friend who gave me this CD, he's a huge fan of Mishima, so he recommended this book, and I read it around the same time as around the same time as now, but a year ago, and I enjoyed it. I mostly liked it. There were a couple moments where it felt, there were a couple moments where Mishima went on this long tangent about philosophy or about law, and I didn't even know what I was reading, and I thought that was kind of incomprehensible. But beyond that, I thought it was really beautifully written. He has a very beautiful style, Mishima, and but I feel like I would really have to reread this to I guess just refine my thoughts about it, really remember what I think of it, and so I would like to come back to Mishima at some point. I would also like to read the second book in this series, because this book is part of a 4-book series that Mishima wrote, and I have the second novel up on my shelf there, which my friend gave me, or which my friend let me borrow. So I'm gonna have to do that soon. I'm gonna have to reread this as well as read this series. So yeah, that's my first. That was the first book that I read of 2024. The second one that I read, and I spent a long time reading this one, a couple of months I think. This is the biography of James Merrill, Life and Art by Langdon Hammer. And this was the very first biography that I've ever read. And it was a magical experience. Really, really well written, incredibly well researched. Langdon Hammer. I think Langdon Hammer spent many years writing this, and it came out in I believe 2015. And yeah, it's comprehensive. It covers everything you could possibly want to know about James Merrill. And it, to me, I learned so much, not only about James Merrill's poetry, but also about James Merrill's life, what kind of person he was, his incredibly warm personality, and the incredible life that he lived. And yeah, I think this is just an absolutely beautiful book, and I'm I'm definitely going to revisit this in the future, as well as James Merrill's poetry. I love the poetry too. So yeah, this was really one of the most memorable reads of 2024. And yeah. The next one was also an incredibly memorable read. These are the Earthsea books by Ursula K. Le Guin. So after I read the James Merrill biography, I picked up this big thing. I'm having a hard time holding it with just one hand. And I read the whole thing in sequential order, and it was just wonderful. It was just the wonder of discovering a new fantasy world, and especially discovering Ursula K. Le Guin's writing. She's incredibly intelligent and also a really beautiful writer. Her style is not overly flowery, but still very poetic, which makes sense because she is a poet. And I actually just recently I picked up some of her poetry. I have her complete poetry in a Library of America volume. So yeah, she's really amazing. And I want to start reading her science fiction, especially next. Yeah. Next up would be E.M. Forster. I only read this edition has 3 of his novels in one, but I only read A Room with a View. But even so, the experience was really, well, again memorable. All of these reads are memorable, I guess. But yeah, it was incredible. It felt really full of depth. I don't know. It's not. It's a romance story, but it's not sparkling in the way that Jane Austen is. It's more. It almost feels, to an extent, troubled, or a little bit darker. There's a little bit more. Not more complexity, because Jane Austen is also very complex, but it just felt like there was a lot of depth here, and yeah, it has stuck in my mind ever since I read it, and I want to read Howard's End and Maurice next. Even though I believe, I think Joe Spivey read Howard's End, or it might have been a different novel, and he didn't seem to like it. But so we'll see. I'll have to read Howard's End and see if I agree with Joe, or if we'll have to fight it out. Next up is the Great Dialogues of Plato. Actually, I only read the Symposium, so I just used this volume to read his one work about love. And I actually read this. In a group read on Justin's channel. I'll leave a channel to. Yeah, his channel is called Triumphal Reads, I believe. I'll leave a link to his channel in the description. But Justin has a philosophy Discord. He also has a science reading Discord, which is really great. We were doing a group read on his philosophy Discord, and we chose the Symposium. So I read that during the spring, and it was really good. I'm definitely going to have to return to this as well, because already a lot of the ideas are fading from me. I thought some of the essentially how it's structured is, there's a symposium, so there's multiple rather than just having Socrates talk with another character, and kind of have that character just be a yes man to Socrates. there's multiple characters all sitting around a dinner table and all giving their own theories about what love is and what's the meaning of love. And I thought some of the earlier characters, or the earlier contributions to the discussion of what love is, the ideas that they said were a little bit ridiculous. But then when it came to Socrates' own turn, I thought there was something really beautiful in what he was saying, although I don't know if I can express it farther than that. Because so that's why I want to reread this. There was really something that moved me there. I'm not sure what though. Next up is The Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne. This is a Library of America edition with all of his novels, but I've only read The Scarlet Letter. I read it in the spring as well, but I actually didn't like this novel that much. It didn't. I can kind of, like, it was written perfectly, and I can see how it was dramatic, and I can see how it was a really good novel, but it just didn't move me. I didn't have any kind of connection to it. And so that means I'm going to want to reread this as well. I think I'm just going to want to reread everything that I've read in 2024. Yeah, I don't know why. I just didn't connect to it, which makes me think that maybe I was missing something. So I want to give this another chance. I also want to give his other novels a chance as well. Next up is Rudyard Kipling's The Jungle Books. This was a wonderful read. I mean, obviously the Jungle Books are famous for Mowgli and those stories, but it's a series of short stories, and all the non-Mowgli short stories where he just tells you a one-off tale about an animal. Typically, the main character of the story will be an animal, and he'll give that animal usually characteristics that are fitting to what kind of animal it is. And yeah, Kipling is a wonderful storyteller. He invests all of his characters with such humanity. And yeah, I love all the stories in here. And the Mowgli stories, even though I also love, of course, the non-Mowgli stories, but the Mowgli stories too, especially the ending where he has to go and live with the humans and say goodbye to his jungle family. I thought that was just a heartbreaking and bittersweet moment. So that's the Jungle Books. Next up is Dante's Divine Comedy. I read this during the summer, and it took me, I think, about 2 months. I think it took me the entire summer to read. I think I was reading it alongside some of the other things that I've mentioned here, and reading this felt like I was also climbing Mount Purgatory. It was a climb, but I'm so happy that I did it. It was, this translation is by C.H. Sisson, and the notes are by David Higgins. The translation itself is a little bit bland. There were, especially at the very end of this epic poem, at the climax where he's at the top of paradise, and he sees this holy vision, the Holy Trinity. You could tell just by what was being described that the Italian was supposed to be this kind of rhapsodic, climactic buildup of beauty. But then reading this translation, you could also tell that you didn't have access to that beauty, because Sisson's translation was just telling you in a pretty straightforward way what was happening. So the translation was a barrier, but not a complete barrier. I still got such a sense of the conceptual masterpiece that the Divine Comedy is, and so I love this work, and I want to return to a different translation soon. So what haven't I showed you here? This is the Norton Anthology of English Literature, 3rd edition, the Major Authors edition. And I'm holding this up because I read the Beowulf translation that's in this volume. Just right at the beginning, this is the Beowulf translation. It's a prose translation, I think done by one of the editors of this volume, so done by a scholar, and it was yeah, I read this during the summer as well. Honestly, I think I read it. I think I didn't give it enough due attention. So I enjoyed reading the story, but I feel like there's more that I need to unpack, and I need to reread it again. But next time that I reread it, I will probably read it in the Seamus Heaney translation rather than this one. But this was just something that I read in I think it was in one day during the summer, and I think I need to give it more time. Yeah. So I'll mention the next one, and that is The Magic Mountain by Thomas Mann. I read this. I mean, I just read this in the fall, so yeah. If you've been following my channel for the past couple of months, you would have seen me talk about this on a couple of different occasions. This was also a very magical and memorable reading experience. There's something, I don't know, something about the world. It's like Mann creates this lost world that doesn't exist anymore, a world full of beauty and all these different, I guess, philosophical ideas. Because the story is that Hans Castorp, a young German engineer, goes to visit his cousin in a tuberculosis sanatorium in the Alps, and he gets tuberculosis himself and stays there for 7 years or something like that. And I don't know, within the sanatorium, man just creates this, I don't know, it's really beautiful world, and at times it's charming and funny, and the characters are sometimes kind of ridiculous. They're kind of parodied by Mann, but at the same time you grow to like the characters and to feel attached to them. There's Settembrini, the Italian humanist philosopher, and yeah, and there are other characters too, but yeah, this novel was really, really beautiful, and I really want to go back into the world of it, hopefully sometime soon. And yeah, I really enjoyed this. Next up is Homer's Odyssey. I finished this right before the end of the year, I think, and so yeah, I mean, I think I just mentioned, I think in one of my previous reading update videos I talked about this already, but this was a reread for me in the Chapman translation, and yeah, I really connected with the story a lot more this time around than I did the first time around, and Chapman writes some really beautiful lines, and so yeah, I really want to, after the reading this, I'm planning on reading Chapman's Iliad as well, and also I want to read other translations of both of Homer's works. I have the Emily Wilson translation here, and I have the Fagles translations as well as the Lattimore translation of the Odyssey. So I have lots of translations to get to. Next up, I read Moll Flanders by Daniel Defoe. This was also a really delightful read. Excuse me. Yeah, it was. Moll Flanders is such a memorable character, and it's just a rollicking, unceasingly interesting story. And I think I would like to revisit this at some point, although not immediately. Defoe has a very plain writing style. I feel like if I were to reread it so soon, I would get sick of it. But the character of Moll Flanders is really something special. I also read Robinson Crusoe by Daniel Defoe, which reading this felt like I was reading something that I had already known about almost. I think because Robinson Crusoe is it's one of those works maybe that has seeped into the popular consciousness, so that even if you haven't read this actual novel, you kind of know the story. It's the typical, the archetypal man gets stranded on an island story, and I thought it was told in very entertaining and witty prose, and yeah. I don't know if I don't know if I would ever actually read this though. I don't know. It didn't strike me as anything incredible, but just really enjoyable. And also, I read some James Baldwin this year. This is the 3-volume Library of America set. I read Notes of a Native Son, the first, I believe it was the second book that he published, and the first nonfiction book that he published. It's a collection of essays by him, mostly reflecting on matters of race in America. And there are a couple essays in that volume that have stuck with me a lot. And there's one where he goes and he visits, I think it's Switzerland. He visits a European country where there aren't any black people there. And when he goes there, they call him, I can't remember, but it's the French equivalent of the N-word, except for the people in that town in Switzerland that he visits, they don't realize that it's a slur in America. And so they say this without realizing the meaning attached to it for Baldwin himself, and Baldwin kind of explores that interesting cultural gap. And that's just one of the essays in there. So Baldwin himself is an incredibly memorable and passionate and poetic writer. It feels like there's something burning through his books, like there's some kind of energy in his books, always. I don't know how else to explain it. I also read 2 of his novels. I read this middle volume, Early Novels and Stories, and I read what was it? I read Giovanni's Room, and I read Go Tell It on the Mountain, his first 2 novels. And so that's what I read for Baldwin there. And I figure I might as well, oh, I forgot, I have Kindle books to show you as well, because I read 2 books on Kindle this year. Although I read them earlier in the year when I didn't have this Kindle device, so I read them on my phone. And the first of which, let me just, hold on. Sorry for the delay. Okay. I read Anne of Green Gables, the first 2 novels in her Anne of Green Gables series. This was a really wonderful read for me. I read it during the summer, and it's such an idyllic world in a way. There is, it's not idyllic to the point of being gaudy, but it's a comfort read. And I think actually when I was pulling out all the books here and preparing these books, and I had occasion to think about this series again, suddenly I now want to read farther in this series. I read the first 2 books, and I think there are 5 or 6 of them. I would really like to read farther because I feel like I might be in need of a comfort read these days, because the world that Montgomery creates it has pain and sadness in it. Some people die, and she talks about those themes, but it's still comforting. I guess it's, even those painful moments are told with the knowledge that things are going to be okay. It's that kind of story. So yeah, I would really like to return to Anne of Green Gables at some point. And one more Kindle read. Sorry, let me just go. Okay. Hold on. Okay. This is the besides The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, which I'm still reading right now, so I can't count it among my 2024 reads. But so this was the only nonfiction book that I read in 2000. Besides the Merrill book, this was the only nonfiction book that I read in 2024. It's the Pagent of England by Thomas B. Costain. I only read the Pagent of England is, I think, a series by Costain, but the first volume in the series is called The Conquering Family, and that's the one that I read. It goes from the Norman invasion to I think it's King John's death, the horrible king who was forced to sign the Magna Carta. I read from so that volume was covering those periods, and Costain he's a popular historian, so he makes always makes sure that he's telling these stories in entertaining prose. He's the kind of historian who will describe the armor, or he'll set the scene before actually diving into the details of a battle, for example. He's that kind of author, which I like because it's very entertaining. It's very well written, and so that keeps me entertained. But also, having that kind of really engaging storyteller makes the historical events feel very real and livid. Not livid, that isn't the right word. Very vivid, it would be the right word. It makes it, it feels really very real and memorable. It allows those historical events to kind of stay in my mind because of the drama with which they are told. So I want to reread, actually. I would really love to reread the first volume that I read in this series, but I would also like to continue with the series and read farther into English history. So yeah, I think that's... Oh, there's more, sorry. So I also read... I'm a university student, and I'm an English literature student, so I pulled out 4 novels that I read for my classes, for one of my classes, and that class was a Harlem Renaissance class. So we read a number of novels and volumes of poetry, which I just pulled out of my shelf there because I realized that I hadn't taken it out yet. So I have 5 books for you here that we read during the Harlem Renaissance class. The first is Langston Hughes's The Weary Blues. This is a very tiny volume of poetry, which I enjoyed. He reminds me a lot of Whitman in a way, in his kind of free verse, but still, the poem still feels, his poetry still feels like it has a form. He's still playing with rhymes or half rhymes, or you can still kind of track his stresses, but there's a lot more freedom with it, and it's very conversational in a way. So yeah, I enjoyed Langston Hughes. Although his poetry wasn't, at the same time, his poetry wasn't absolutely astounding, but I enjoyed it. We also read Zora Neale Hurston, Their Eyes Were Watching God. And this may have been my favorite novel in the entire class. It's told, I can't remember the character names, so I don't think I'll be able to recite recite the plot very well, but there's a real beauty with which the story is told. Hurston doesn't, except for a couple moments, she doesn't usually seem to go into racial problems, at least not explicitly. She just kind of tells, she almost tries to depict Black life in a just in a kind of, I don't know. She tries to depict Black life in a very beautiful way. And yeah, that's that. I also read The Conjurman Dies by Rudolph Fisher. This is a mystery novel set in Harlem. And it was, it's not Shakespeare, but it was really enjoyable. Actually, now that I've read this, I really want to try reading some Dashiell Hammett, because I read the introduction to this volume. There was an introduction written by, I think, another mystery writer. Let me just check. Yeah, it was written by Stanley Ellen, and I think he's another mystery writer. So I would like to read, and in that introduction, he mentioned how Fisher was influenced by Dashiell Hammett partially, and so now I really want to read Dashiell Hammett as well. And I also want to read Dashiell Hammett because I watched The Maltese Falcon, the movie, and that was very fun. So yeah. Also, we read The Streets by Anne Petrie. And I liked this but didn't love it because I thought that it was a little bit bloated. It seemed to me like Petrie has a tendency to overwrite a bit, but still it was not enjoyable actually, because Petrie's story is incredibly depressing. I think the point of this novel was to act as a form of social criticism, depicting just how hard people in Harlem in the 1940s had it. And she was certainly effective at doing that. But it was kind of a dreary read. And then lastly, Passing by Nella Larson. This is a very short thing, but this is told with, the writing style is very concise. It's told with a lot of precision. There's a real bite to her prose style, and it also feels incredibly intricate. I had to read this twice because, I had to read this twice because, I was studying for writing an essay on it, and I wanted to reread it, and reading it the second time around, reading it the second time around, I noticed a lot more subtleties within this text. So it's an incredibly subtle novel, and yeah, really, I like this a lot. This might have been my second favorite novel behind Their Eyes Were Watching God. But that is all. That is, I think, most of what I've read during 2024. And so yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. This is a long video, 30 minutes. Okay, so I'll end it now. Bye-bye.